this one says there were 42 passengers on an airplane flight. First class fare was $80 and coach fare was $64. If the revenue for the flight totaled $2,880, how many first class and how many coach passengers paid for the flight? Okay, so this one, pretty common problem, not as hard as some of the other ones. And so first off, what is it asking for? It's saying how many first class, right? And how many coach. So let's just give those two values variables. So let's just go ahead and call the number of first class passengers, right? Let's call that F for first class. Okay, so F could be number of first class, and let's call C the number of coach passengers. Okay, and then so that's either the number of passengers or the number of tickets sold. Should be the same number, right? And so, so the first thing you want to notice is that there were 42 total passengers, and first class and coach is the only type of passenger there can be, right? So it should be that the number of first class plus the number of coach should add up to the total passengers, which is 42. So we can already start off with an equation of F plus C equals 42. Okay, and so another equation that we can get is just realize that the revenue is usually like the number of items sold times the price for that item, right? If you're selling lemonades for $2 each and you sell 5 lemonades, that's a revenue of $10, right? Because 5 lemonades at $2 each, 5 times 2 is 10. So same thing here. The revenue you made from the coach passenger should just be the number of passengers that bought those kind of tickets, C, times the price of a coach ticket, which is 64. And then same thing with first class. F times 80 should be the amount of money in revenue from the first class passengers. So if you add those together, you'll get the total revenue for the flight. So all we need to do for the next equation is just do 80 times F, right? Plus 64C should equal 2,880. Okay, and so now we have a system of equations. Probably do an elimination, right? We could say F equals 42 minus C. If we substitute that F into this one, we're going to have 80 times 42 minus C, right? Plus 64C equals 2,880. Okay, so if we do 80 times 42 over here, I know 80 times 40 is 3,200, and then 80 times 2 is 160. So weird trick, you can do that on your calculator if you want, but you're going to get, I think, 3,360 for this, minus 80C, right? And then plus 64C equals 2,880. Okay, so now let's subtract this on both sides. Okay, so we're going to get, and let's also combine this while we're at it. So if we have a negative 80 and a positive 64, that's going to leave us with a negative 16, right? $3,360, right? And let's move this up a little bit. Okay, so we have negative 16C equals, I think this is going to be, okay, so 2,880 minus 3,360 is actually negative 480, right? Had to do that one on my calculator really quick. And so then we're going to divide by negative 16 on both sides. Right? Oh, whoops. And then so we're going to get C is equal to 480 divided by 16. I think that's going to be 30. Okay, so we have C equals 30. That means there were 30 coach passengers, right? 30 people bought coach tickets. And so that's one of our answers. So now all we have to do is take that back up to where we substituted. We said F equals 42 minus C, and I'll just do it really quick. Actually, I'll bring that down here. F equals 42 minus C. So F equals 42 minus C. So that's going to be 42, right, minus 30. So we know that F is going to be equal to 12, right? Okay, so then that means that 12 people bought first class tickets, which sounds about right. There should be less first class than coach tickets, right? And that's the answer to our problem, right? 30 and 12. All right, let's try this one on your own. So it says, suppose I owned a bakery where I sold a regular pie for $5.50 and an extra large pie for $8.75. One day I sold all of the pies that I made, and the total pie sales for the day, right, the total revenue, came out to $330.50. That says $0.5. Let's assume that means $330.50. On that day, I know that the number of small pies I made was 5 more than 3 times the number of extra large pies that I made. How many of each kind of pie did I sell? So go ahead, pause the video, think about this one a little bit. This one's a little trickier than the other ones, some of them. And so you have to make 2 equations, I'll give you that hint, that are true for this scenario, and then just solve the system of equations, right? Because you're going to have 2 variables. And so think about how, think about what it's asking for. It's asking for the number of small pies sold and the number of large pies sold. So you can make that X for the small pies, Y for the large pies, or anything like that. And also, remember that the number of pies you sold times the price of that type of pie is the revenue for that type of pie. And then you just add the 2 revenues up to get the total. And then for the second part, the number of small pies I made was 5 more than 3 times the number of extra large pies. Just think about the numbers there and sort of like relate, you know, the number of pies sold. And try to solve that one. So go ahead, give it a try. Okay, hopefully you gave it a try. And so, assuming we called R the number of regular sized pies, and L the number of large sized pies, then you should have came up with the equation 550 times R plus 875 times L is equal to 330.5, right? And that's because 550 is the price for a regular sized pie. And so if you multiply those together, you get the revenue for regular. If you multiply 875 times the number of large pies, you get the revenue for the large pies. If you add them together, you get the total revenue. And then over here, it says that the number of small pies, well, we said regular, small, regular, we're saying those are the same, was 5 more than 3 times the number of large pies. So we're saying the small pies is 5 more plus 5 than 3 times the number of large. So R is just going to be equal to 3L plus 5, right? That's how we thought about that. Then we just solve the system of equations. We get R is 41, L is 12, so we sold 41 of our small or regular size pies and 12 of the extra large pies. So hopefully you got the same answer.